Mom, you're too old to understand how things work nowadays. My daughter's words sliced through the chatter of her son's birthday party. The room fell silent for a moment before awkward laughter filled the void. I caught my son-in-law Tyler's smirk as he clinked glasses with one of his tech buddies. My suggestion to set up a college fund for my grandson had apparently crossed some invisible line of modern parenting. I smiled and nodded, the perfect picture of a chastised mother who had overstepped her bounds. Little did Amber know that I wasn't just a guest in her luxury Manhattan apartment building, I was her landlord. The irony wasn't lost on me as I sipped my champagne, surveying the meticulously decorated room with its panoramic views of Central Park. This was the same daughter who once sat on my lap while I worked late nights balancing spreadsheets to afford her ballet lessons. The same girl I raised alone after her father. My beloved Robert died from a sudden heart attack 15 years ago. Life has a way of rewriting the roles we play. In my case, it transformed me from Teresa Coleman, the widowed mother struggling to maintain normalcy for her grieving teenager, to the silent owner of a prime piece of New York real estate. Not that anyone in the room would suspect it. At 65, with my simple clothing and unfussy silver bob, I looked exactly as they expected, a middle-class retiree from suburban New Jersey who didn't understand the complexities of modern finances. I watched Amber flutter around the room, her designer dress catching the late afternoon light. She'd grown into a beautiful woman, tall like her father, with my dark eyes, but none of my restraint. She embraced the lifestyle that her advertising executive position and Tyler's tech job afforded them, or at least the lifestyle they projected. The distance between us had grown gradually after she married Tyler. What started as mist. Sunday calls evolved into holiday visits that felt more like obligations. I noticed the change in her eyes when she looked at me, a mixture of embarrassment and pity that wounded more deeply than outright cruelty. "Can I get you anything else, Mrs. Coleman?" The catering staff treated me with more warmth than my own daughter had all afternoon. "I'm fine, thank you," I replied, wondering if they knew I signed their company's annual contract for building events. My relationship with Amber hadn't always been strained. I still remembered how she clung to me at her father's funeral, both of us adrift in grief. I had promised Robert I would take care of our daughter, and I devoted myself to that promise. I worked harder, saved smarter, and made sure Amber never felt the financial strain that threatened to engulf us after the medical bills. When she was accepted to Columbia, I sold our family home to cover what her scholarship didn't. "It's just a house," I told her when she protested. "Your education matters more." I downsized to a modest condo and never looked back. What Amber didn't know, what I never felt the need to explain, was that Robert had been shrewd with our investments. The life insurance policy combined with his portfolio had left me more comfortable than I let on. I maintained a modest lifestyle by choice, not necessity. And when an opportunity arose to invest in a small apartment building in Manhattan 5 years ago, I had the means to seize it. That building expanded to 3, then 5 properties across the city. "Grandma, look what I got." My grandson Jackson's excited voice pulled me from my thoughts. He held up a gleaming remote control car, the latest model that cost more than my first full month's salary. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I said, genuinely delighted by his excitement. His innocent joy was one of the few authentic things in this carefully curated apartment. "Dad says it's the best one," Jackson announced proudly. "He says only the best is good enough for a Mitchell." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. The Mitchell family motto, "only the best," had become something of a running joke between Robert and me back when Amber first started dating Tyler. The young man had refused the modest wine we offered at dinner, explaining that he only drank certain vintages. Robert had raised his eyebrows at me across the table, and later that night we laughed about it in the privacy of our bedroom. Now that phrase had become a guiding principle for my daughter's family, a justification for their extravagant lifestyle, and I suspected the mounting debt behind it. My thoughts were interrupted by Tyler's booming voice. "Teresa, come meet Julian. He manages our investment portfolio." The unspoken implication hung in the air. "Since you need financial help, Julian, A pleasant-looking man in his 40s shook my hand. Tyler says you've been thinking about retirement communities. I know some excellent options that offer financial planning services for seniors. I felt my spine stiffen but kept my expression neutral. How thoughtful, though I'm quite comfortable with my arrangements. Mom refuses to plan for the future, Amber interjected, joining our circle. I keep telling her that her small pension won't be enough if she needs assisted living. Her voice carried that familiar note of condescension wrapped in concern. I've managed this far, I replied simply. That's the problem, Mom. You've managed when you could be thriving. If you'd just let Tyler and me help with your finances. Like you helped with Grandma's money. The words escaped before I could stop them, referencing how they'd convinced my mother to invest in one of Tyler's friend's startups that ultimately failed. Amber's face flushed. That was different, and it's exactly why you need professional advice. You don't understand today's financial landscape. I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment alone, as I walked down the hallway of their 3,000-square-foot apartment. I passed framed photos of their travels. Paris, Tokyo, the Maldives. All while they claimed they couldn't afford to visit me in New Jersey more than twice a year. The guest bathroom was larger than my first apartment. All marble and gleaming fixtures. I splashed water on my face and studied my reflection. The lines around my eyes had deepened over the years, but they were honest lines earned through both laughter and tears. I didn't look like a woman who owned multiple properties in one of the world's most expensive real estate markets, and that had always been just fine with me. Robert had been the one who taught me about investing. Money is just a tool, Teresa, he would say. It's what you build with it that matters. We'd built a life together, modest but comfortable, rich in experiences rather than possessions. When he died, I continued applying his principles, growing our savings steadily and cautiously. I remembered the day Amber and Tyler applied for this apartment. They had no idea it was in one of my buildings. The management company handled everything. When Gregory Barnes, my property manager, called to tell me my daughter had applied, I was stunned by the coincidence. But after the initial shock faded, I saw no reason to reveal myself. I approved their application, like any other tenants curious to see where life would take us. For 3 years, I maintained my silence even as their treatment of me worsened. I endured Tyler's condescending explanations about investments to a woman who had managed a financial department for 20 years. I weathered Amber's increasing shame about my outdated lifestyle. I smiled through their pointed questions about my will and retirement plans. Your mother is quite frugal, isn't she? I overheard one of their friends comment at a previous gathering. It's her generation. Amber had replied with a sigh. They lived through different times. She doesn't understand that some things are worth splurging on. What Amber didn't realize was that I understood the value of money all too well. I knew the difference between investing and splurging, between appreciating assets and depreciating status symbols. I had watched Robert's sister lose everything, chasing the appearance of wealth. I had no intention of making the same mistake or seeing my daughter repeat it. The final straw came 6 months ago. I had asked if I could stay with them for a week to spend time with Jackson during his school break. I missed him terribly, and my condo was undergoing renovations. It's not really a good time, Mom, Amber had said. We don't have the space. I had seen their guest room sitting empty during my visits. I had heard them offer it to friends for weekend stays. I could sleep on the couch. I suggested. Tyler needs the living room for conference calls in the morning, and frankly, Mom Jackson's at an age where he needs consistency. Having you here might disrupt his routine. And the rejection stung. But what hurt more was the realization that I had become an inconvenience to my own daughter. The same daughter whose midnight fevers I had nursed, whose tears I had dried after every disappointment. I still remembered how small her hand had felt in mine on her first day of kindergarten, how she had looked back at me 5 times as she walked into the classroom, each glance a little more confident than the last. I had stood at the window long after she'd disappeared, inside, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and longing. Now, as I reapplied my lipstick in her guest bathroom, I wondered when exactly I had transformed from her safety net into her burden. When had my advice become irrelevant? My presence an embarrassment? That evening, after the tense phone call about staying with them, I made myself a cup of tea and pulled out the folder containing the details of their apartment building. Their lease was coming up for renewal in 6 months. As I reviewed the terms, a plan began to form in my mind. The next day, I called my old friend Elaine Walters. We had met in college and remained close over the decades. After her divorce, she had thrown herself into her career as a real estate attorney, becoming one of the best in New Jersey. "Teresa, what a lovely surprise." She greeted me over lunch at our favorite cafe. I explained my situation, laying out the facts without emotion. Elaine's expression shifted from shock to thoughtful consideration. "So they have no idea you own the building where they live, none at all?" "Not the slightest clue," I confirmed. "The management company handles everything. They've never had reason to meet the owner. And now their lease is coming up for renewal." Elaine's lips curved into a small smile. "What exactly did you have in mind?" I outlined my thoughts, and together we refined them into a plan that was both legally sound and I hoped effective in delivering the message I wanted to convey. "It's not about punishing them," I explained, stirring my tea. "It's about teaching them respect, about showing them that appearances aren't everything." "And if they don't learn the lesson?" Elaine asked. Ever the pragmatist. I considered this. Then at least I'll have been true to myself. I've spent too many years being diminished by them. Elaine reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Robert would be proud of you. You know, he always said you were the backbone of the family." I blinked back unexpected tears. "I miss him every day." "He'd tell you to stand your ground," she said confidently, "and to do it with grace." Grace. That was what I wanted to maintain throughout this process. Not revenge for its own sake, but a dignified reclaiming of respect. Over the next few months, I prepared carefully. I arranged meetings with Gregory Barnes to discuss the building's performance and casually inquired about Amber and Tyler's standing as tenants. "They're prompt with rent," Gregory reported, "but they've had several complaints from neighbors about noise from parties, and they've requested numerous special accommodations. They tend to name drop and expect preferential treatment." That sounded like the Tyler I knew. Always leveraging connections, always expecting the red carpet I had. Gregory compiled a detailed report of their tenancy, including every maintenance request, every complaint, every interaction. I wanted a complete picture before proceeding. "There's also the matter of the unauthorized renovations," Gregory mentioned at our last meeting. "Unauthorized renovations," I repeated. Surprised. Gregory nodded. "They knocked down a wall between the dining room and what was supposed to be a home office. Did it without permits or permission. We only discovered it during the routine inspection last month." I sighed. This was so typical of them, assuming rules were for other people. During this time, I also learned something troubling from my grandson. During one of our rare outings together, Jackson, now 7, mentioned offhandedly that his dad was worried about the big money problem. When I gently probed, he shrugged and said sometimes his parents argued late at night about bills. "Daddy says we can't tell anyone about the money problem," he confided as we shared an ice cream sundae. "He says it would hurt his reputation." This revelation puzzled me. With their combined salaries, they should have been comfortable even with Manhattan's cost of living. I asked Elaine to discreetly look into public records. What she discovered painted a concerning picture. Multiple credit lines, a second mortgage on a vacation property I hadn't known about, and several tax liens. "They're stretched thin," Elaine concluded, "living well beyond their means." The knowledge didn't bring me joy. Despite everything, Amber was still my daughter, and the thought of her in financial distress worried me, but it also confirmed what I had long suspected. The perfection they projected was a carefully maintained facade. I thought of Robert again. He had always valued substance over appearance. "The loudest people in the room," he would say, "are often the ones with the least to say." Tyler was certainly loud in his opinions, his ambitions, his criticism of others. But underneath all that noise was a man drowning in debt, desperately maintaining the illusion of success. Meanwhile, I took steps to secure my grandson's future. I established a trust for Jackson's education that could not be accessed for any other purpose. I made Elaine the trustee, ensuring that neither Amber nor Tyler could divert the funds. As the lease renewal date approached, I had Gregory send the standard notice, but with one significant change. The rent would be increasing by 15%, reflecting current market rates, but substantially more than their previous annual increases of 3%. 3 days later, I received a panicked call from Amber. "Mom, can you believe these people? Our rent is going up by 15%. It's highway robbery." I made sympathetic noises while she ranted. "Tyler's going to fight it. He knows people. They can't just jack up the price like this without justification." "Maybe the owner has expenses to cover," I suggested mildly. "The owner is some faceless corporation that doesn't care about families," she snapped. "They just see dollar signs." I suppressed a laugh at the irony. "What will you do if they don't budge?" "We can't move. Jackson's school is nearby and all our friends are in this building." "Tyler's networking connections." She sighed heavily. "We'll figure something out. Tyler's expecting a big bonus soon." I knew from Elaine's research that Tyler's company had announced a freeze on bonuses for the year. "I'm sure you'll work something out," I said neutrally. "You've always been resourceful." "I just wish we had some leverage," she complained. "Some way to negotiate." If only she knew. The next phase of my plan unfolded 2 weeks later. Gregory informed them that the building's owner wanted to meet all renewing tenants personally, a new policy to foster community. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at 6 p.m. in the building's conference room. I arrived early, dressed in one of my few designer outfits, a navy Chanel suit I'd purchased for Robert's funeral and rarely worn since. Elaine sat beside me, legal documents arranged neatly before us. At precisely 6:05, Amber and Tyler burst into the room already mid-argument. "Told you we should have brought Julian," Tyler was saying before he registered my presence. His step faltered. "Teresa, what are you doing here?" Amber looked equally confused. "Mom, are you looking at apartments in the building?" "This is a private meeting with the owner." I smiled calmly. "I know." Gregory, standing by the door, cleared his throat. "Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, allow me to introduce Teresa Coleman, the principal owner of Coleman Properties, which owns this building, and 4 others in Manhattan." The silence that followed was absolute. I watched comprehension dawn slowly on their faces, followed by disbelief. "That's not possible," Tyler finally sputtered. "I assure you it is." Elaine interjected smoothly, sliding a document toward them. "Here's the deed of ownership if you'd care to verify." Amber sank into a chair, her complexion ashen. "Mom, you own our building." "For how long?" "Since before you moved in," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I saw no reason to mention it. Tyler's shock transformed rapidly into calculation. I could practically see the gears turning behind his eyes. "Well, this changes everything. Teresa, Mom, you should have told us. Think of all the family discount we've been missing out on." And he attempted a jovial laugh that fell flat in the tense room. "Actually," I said, opening the folder before me, "that's not why I wanted to meet. Your lease renewal has some specific terms I'd like to discuss." I walked them through the new conditions. The 15% increase in rent, a clause restricting the number of large gatherings per month, a requirement to address neighbor complaints within 48 hours, and a stipulation that guests could stay no more than 1 week at a time. Unless they're immediate family members like grandparents, I added pointedly. Tyler's face reddened as I continued. By the time I reached the final page, he was fuming. "This is ridiculous. You can't legally enforce half of these terms." "Actually, she can," Elaine interjected. I've reviewed everything. It's all perfectly legal. And what about the unauthorized renovations? Gregory added. Removing that wall violated both building policy and city code. Tyler's head whipped toward him. Who told you about that? It was discovered during the routine inspection. Gregory replied calmly. As noted in your lease agreement, all structural changes require prior approval. You're going to hold us to some fine print. Tyler demanded, his voice rising. After everything we've done for this building, we've hosted board members, referred high-profile clients. You've also generated 17 noise complaints in the past year. I countered, referencing Gregory's report, and requested preferential treatment for maintenance calls. Amber had remained silent, staring at the papers before her. When she finally looked up, tears glistened in her eyes. Is this punishment, Mom? For how we've treated you? The question pierced my carefully maintained composure. Was it punishment? Perhaps partly, but it was something else too, a lesson I felt compelled to teach. It's a reality check, Amber. For both of you. I kept my voice gentle. You've been living beyond your means while treating me like I'm financially incompetent. You've excluded me from your lives while living in a building I own. You've dismissed my concerns about Jackson's future while I've been quietly securing it. Tyler snorted. So this is some kind of twisted power play. Show us who's really in charge. No, I replied simply. It's a demonstration of consequences. Actions have them. Words, too. I thought of all the dismissive comments, the condescending explanations, the not-so-subtle implications that I was out of touch. I thought of being denied a place to stay in my own building. I thought of Amber's embarrassment when I wore the same dress to 2 different events. I reached into my briefcase and withdrew another folder. I'm offering you an alternative. There's a smaller 2-bedroom unit available on the 4th floor. Same school district for Jackson. The rent is 30% less than what you're currently paying. You could build back your savings. A downgrade, Tyler scoffed. Absolutely not. Tyler. Amber warned, her eyes never leaving my face. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me about any of this? Your investments, this building. I considered my answer carefully. Would it have changed how you saw me? Would you have valued my advice about Jackson's college fund if you knew I could afford to send him myself? Or would you have seen me as a resource to be used rather than a person to be respected? The questions hung in the air between us. Amber had the grace to look away first. Gregory excused himself, leaving the 4 of us in uncomfortable silence. You have until the end of the month to decide, I finally said, gathering my papers. Either sign the new lease for your current apartment with the updated terms and rate, or take the smaller unit. If neither option works for you, Gregory can provide references for comparable buildings in the area, though you won't find anything cheaper in this neighborhood. Tyler stormed out, muttering about lawyers and family loyalty. Amber lingered, her expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. Why now? She asked simply. Because I'm not too old to understand when I'm being mistreated, I replied, and I'm not too old to do something about it. As I walked to the elevator, I felt a strange lightness. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth without fear of judgment. I had reclaimed my power without apology. Robert would have approved. The weeks that followed were tense. Tyler left angry voicemails that I didn't return. Amber sent conflicted text messages, alternating between apologies and accusations. I maintained my distance, giving them space to make their decision. One afternoon, I received an unexpected call from Julian, their financial advisor. Mrs. Coleman, I hope you don't mind me reaching out directly, he began. Tyler and Amber gave me permission to discuss their situation with you. I'm listening, I replied cautiously. They're in a difficult position financially, he explained. More difficult than they've let on. The smaller apartment would be beneficial for them, but Tyler is resistant to what he sees as a step down. I wasn't surprised. Pride is expensive. Indeed. Julian paused. I've advised them to accept your offer. I thought you should know. Thank you, Julian. That's helpful. Then 3 days before the deadline, Gregory called to inform me they had applied for the smaller apartment I approved immediately. It was another month before I heard directly from Amber. She called on a Sunday morning, her voice subdued. "We're all moved in," she said. "The new place is actually nice, cozier than I expected." "I'm glad to hear that." A pause stretched between us. "Jackson misses you. He keeps asking when Grandma is coming to visit." "I've missed him too." Another silence. Then, "Maybe you could come for dinner next weekend if you're not busy." It wasn't an apology, not exactly, but it was an opening, a small crack in the wall that had grown between us. "I'd like that," I replied. The dinner was awkward at first. Tyler was conspicuously absent, called away on urgent business. Jackson's exuberance at seeing me eased the tension, his endless stories about school and friends filling the silences Amber and I couldn't navigate. The apartment was indeed smaller, but thoughtfully arranged. Gone were many of the ostentatious decorations that had filled their previous home. The simplicity suited them, I thought. After Jackson went to bed, Amber poured us each a glass of wine, not the expensive label they used to serve, but something more modest. "I found Dad's old photo albums while we were packing," she said, bringing a worn leather book to the table. "Remember this trip?" The photograph showed the three of us at the Grand Canyon, Robert's arm around my shoulders, 12-year-old Amber grinning with her braces catching the sunlight. We had driven cross-country that summer, staying in modest motels, picnicking instead of dining out. It had been one of our happiest times. "We didn't have much money that year. I recalled, your father's company was downsizing, but we wanted to show you the country." "I never knew we were struggling," Amber said quietly. "You both made it seem like an adventure." That's what parenting is, sweetheart. Turning challenges into adventures. She traced the outline of her father's face in the photo. I think somewhere along the way, I forgot what really matters. Tyler and I both did. We got caught up in appearances and what other people think. It wasn't a full acknowledgement of how they'd treated me, but it was honest. And honesty was a place to start. "I'm sorry, Mom," she added softly. "For everything." I covered her hand with mine. "I know." In the months that followed our relationship began a slow, cautious healing. Tyler remained distant, still smarting from what he perceived as humiliation. But Amber made consistent efforts to rebuild our connection. She brought Jackson for weekly visits. She asked for my advice tentatively at first, then with increasing sincerity. I learned that they had indeed been struggling financially for years, maintaining their lifestyle through credit and loans, always believing the next promotion or bonus would solve everything. The move to the smaller apartment had forced them to confront reality and begin making changes. "Tyler's been seeing a financial counselor," Amber confided during one of our coffee dates. It was Julian's ultimatum. Get help or find a new advisor. "That's a positive step," I offered. She nodded. "He's also looking for a new job. Something with less pressure, more stability." She sipped her coffee. "We've been selling things. The vacation property, some of the art. It feels good, honestly. Like shedding weight." I thought of Robert again, of his belief that true wealth came from freedom, not possessions. "Your father would be proud of you," I told her. Her eyes brightened at this. "Really, really right," I confirmed. "He always valued courage, and it takes courage to change." 1 year after that tense meeting in the conference room, I invited Amber to lunch at my favorite cafe in New Jersey. After we ordered, I slid an envelope across the table. "What's this?" she asked. The deed to a small property in the Berkshires. It was the first real estate investment I ever made, long before the Manhattan buildings. Your father and I bought it the year before he died. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "Mom, I can't accept this." "It's not a gift exactly. It's your inheritance, a portion of it anyway. I've decided I don't want to wait until I'm gone to share what I've built. I'd rather see you enjoy it. Now watch Jackson grow up spending summers there like you did." Tears filled her eyes. "After everything, why would you do this?" I reached across the table to take her hand. Because you're learning the lesson, Amber. It was never about the money or the property, or even how you treated me. It was about values, understanding what truly matters. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she whispered. Probably not. I agreed with a small smile. But you have it anyway. That's another thing about getting older. You learn that holding on to anger only hurts yourself. I didn't tell her about the condition attached to the deed. The property could never be sold outside the family. Some lessons are best reinforced over time. Today, at 68, I look back on that chapter of our lives with mixed emotions. The pain hasn't entirely faded, nor has Tyler's resentment. But something valuable emerged from that difficult period. A more authentic relationship with my daughter and a precious bond with my grandson. Jackson, now 10, stays with me every other weekend. Last month, he asked me to teach him about investing. Grandma, he said with complete seriousness, Dad says you're really smart about money, and I should learn from you. Small victories. Precious ones. I still own the apartment building where Amber and Tyler live, though I've transferred partial ownership to a trust for Jackson's benefit. I've never used that power again to influence their lives. I didn't need to. The message had been delivered. Sometimes when I visit them in their cozier apartment, I catch Amber watching me with new eyes, not with the dismissive pity of before, but with something like respect, maybe even admiration. It's a look I recognize from long ago, from the little girl who thought her mother could fix anything. We're not that mother and daughter anymore. We've both changed, both learned. But as we sit together on their modest balcony, watching the sunset paint Manhattan's skyline in gold, I think perhaps these new versions of ourselves might understand each other a little better. And understanding, I've discovered, is worth more than any property I own.